Welcome everyone. So this is our panel, remote and hybrid meetings that don't suck. So for this panel, instead of doing a traditional panel, which is sometimes unstructured and a little bit, loose, because this is an event about better meetings, we're going to run this panel as a facilitated meeting. And throughout the meeting, we'll both be modeling how to have meetings that don't suck through our meeting that won't suck, and answering questions through our panel discussion as well. So we'll be tackling some of the common challenges people are facing with their meetings. I will go ahead and share my screen, if I can find it. Here we go. Oop. My screen sharing is paused. How do I unpause that? Let's see.
We can see it, Jean.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
You can see it, the remote and hybrid meetings that don't suck?
Yes.
Okay, Zoom is saying it's paused. I'm not sure why. Cool, so I'll explain each step of the meeting / panel as we go. So first off, we have all our attendees here. Sean is apparently sleepy, and I'll mark him absent because he's going to be helping us take notes for the session, but I won't include him in all the opening rounds and everything else like that. So first off, we've got let me start the meeting. Okay, so first off, we've got the opening round, and in a meeting, if you have an opening round, this is a really good inclusive space for people to participate. And the theory is that once people speak up in a meeting, when you call on them in an opening round, someone said it's frozen sharing. Okay, let me stop sharing and then reshare. Important to get the screen sharing working. Okay, that looks like Zoom knows it's sharing now. Awesome. Sounds good. Okay. So the theory is that once people speak up in a meeting, they're more likely to contribute to the rest of the meeting. And so this kind of goes to the common challenge people are experiencing of how do you get people to engage and speak up. It's also an opportunity, as Sarah mentioned, to check in with each other as humans. So acknowledging that people are feeling a certain way coming into a meeting before diving into tactical work things. So our opening prompts for today are just introduce yourself, share a little bit about how you're doing today, and then also what is your biggest meeting pet peeve? So I will spin to see who goes first. Harper.
Oh boy, I knew it. I have that feeling every time there's a spinner. I'm like, it's me. Hi, my name is Harper Reed. I'm an entrepreneur here in Chicago, Illinois. I have a small startup called Galactic. I try to name things relatively modestly, and I'm doing well today. I'm super excited about talking about meetings. This is one of my favorite topics, as well as it's not super hot today in Chicago. My biggest pet peeve is like a combo one, which is the crosstalk super authority talker type person. And it just drives me just insane because it's like this thing of like the meeting is going so well and everything is good. And then someone is like, oh, and they jump right in and the whole meeting just grinds to a halt. And it's so disruptive, and you can just see people drain as the energy of the meeting has been like just co-opted. And it's frustrating.
Thanks, Harper. Kate.
Hey, I'm Kate. I'm an engineering director in native apps at DuckDuckGo, and I live in Cork, Ireland, which is not part of the UK for Americans present. It's still part of the EU. That's why I live here. I'm doing fine. I mean, just salty as usual because it's whatever time it is here. And my biggest meeting pet peeve is like, you know what? The best meeting is a deleted meeting. Delete all your boring meetings. And so my biggest meeting pet peeve is when I'm in a meeting and I am bored and I believe that meeting should have been deleted.
Thanks, Kate. Juan Pablo.
Hello, everyone. I'm Juan Pablo, or Juan. for Kate, I am JP. And she's one of the only two people who can call me that. I am a engineering leader without a team right now. I'm a free agent or a little bit on a break. I live in New York City. I've led distributed teams for about a decade at startups, early stage, a little bit later stage. Previously, I was at Stripe, in Splice, and other companies that start with an S and end with an E. So that's why it's hard for me to get a job, right? There's there's a few of them. And joking aside, meetings, my biggest pet peeve on meetings is meetings that don't have a purpose or don't start with a purpose. So my team knows very well that the purpose, if we don't start with the purpose of this meeting is, then they've lost me. So that's kind of my pet peeve, and it's great to be here.
Thanks, Juan Pablo. I will not call you JP because I'm not Kate. Katie.
I'm glad the spinner picked me. I was like, oh, this is where one finds off by 1 errors or something. Yay. I'm Katie Wilde. I'm VP of Engineering at Buffer. We're a remote team. And I'm from Cape Town, South Africa, but I live in Vancouver. So that explains the weird accent. Wherever I go, people ask me where I'm from, and it's quite sad. So my pet peeve with meetings is the rambler. Get to the point, make the point. And this is, similar to Harper. When the ramblers are in a position of authority, it's, particularly painful. But that's something where I've seen this person really trash a meeting because it's very difficult to facilitate when there's somebody that's just going on. And we're so trained, you don't want to interrupt people and you want to be nice and they just derail. So that's really difficult. It's my pet peeve, and I try not to let that happen. So I want to talk about that.
Thanks, Katie.
Cool.
I'm Jean. I'm the VP of Engineering here at Range. And today I'm doing pretty well. As I mentioned before, I'm an introvert. And so it's kind of unusual that I run events and stuff. And I always feel somewhat anxious leading up to them, but I always enjoy them during it and then afterwards. And my biggest meeting pet peeve, I think, is like when a meeting has gone off the rails, there's a rambler, there's, someone who's just taken over, and then like a meeting has not been good. And at the end, people are like, good meeting. And like, no one's willing to acknowledge the fact that it was not a good meeting, because I think once you acknowledge it, then you can talk, it's like out there, and then you can talk about how do we fix it. But if people are not willing to acknowledge it, or just genuinely perhaps think that it was a good meeting because they got to talk the whole time, that is like my biggest pet peeve for meetings. All right, so that was the opening round. And so in meetings, this is how we run meetings at Range. Basically, then we move into recurring topics. So these are the topics that you want to cover every time you run the meeting. So you want them to be relevant for everyone in the meeting, definitely not boring for Kate. Focus on topics that benefit from live discussion or some back and forth. So if all of us were on a team working together at work, which would be amazing, these recurring topics might include team metrics or project updates. So I have put in some metrics for us. These are metrics from the Eventbrite survey. So these are metrics for everyone who's attending this event. So how many hours a week do you spend in meetings? We've got a few, almost 7% of people in 30 plus hours of meetings. That sounds pretty rough. And then we've got the bulk of people, about 2/3 of people in somewhere between 11 to 30 hours of meetings. And then we also asked, how would you rate your meetings on a scale of 1 to 5, from 1 being I'm barely making it through, and 5 as I just can't get enough. Surprisingly, no one answered 5, not a single person. But we have a lot of people squarely in that middle, 3, maybe like, they're all right. And a few poor souls in number 1, I'm barely making it through. I also wanted to share one quote. Let's see. Oh yeah, one person shared, oh, this is when we asked, what do you want to get out of this event? And this person said, how to have meetings where you leave feeling productive and confident that you know what to do next instead of, ugh, why? I think we can probably all share that sentiment. So in the metrics review, I think, does anyone have any questions? Is there anything that you find surprising or insightful here? And feel free to just unmute and chime in.
I just want to hug the people in 30+ hours, although I imagine they do not want any more human contact. So perhaps the kindest thing would be to leave them alone.
Delete their meeting, go in their calendar and delete their meetings, maybe. Anything else people want to point out here? All right, moving on. So we've got, this is kind of the project updates. For a recurring topic, the next recurring topic is meeting updates. And this actually was one of the questions from Sarah Milstein's chat. So I saved it for here. I didn't answer that one there. So what we're going to do is just for all the panelists to think about, what's a meeting you have on your calendar or had on your calendar that, that is effective, efficient, and engaging. And then we'll go around the room and share, what was the purpose of the meeting and what is the structure of the meeting that supports that purpose. And as I mentioned before, when you have something like this where you want everyone in the meeting to be engaged, a good trick is just to give people some time to think about it. And so, in a meeting, I might give people a minute or two. For this, I gave you all the prompt before, so I'm just gonna set a 30-second timer for everyone to collect their thoughts, and then we'll dive in. Okay, let's get started. Jean, I'm first. I think the meeting that I have on my calendar that I most enjoy, that's effective, efficient, and engaging, is our end of cycle. So it's every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks on Friday, we have an end of cycle recap, and it's a full team meeting. So we start off, the purpose is to kind of close off the cycle and celebrate with the team on what we got done. So the structure that supports that purpose is we start off with a brief personal check-in, just like we did here. We also have personal reflections. So usually we have prompts that are like, what was a highlight of the cycle, some lowlights, and one of my favorite parts is noble failures. So people share something that maybe didn't quite go as they had planned, but maybe they learned something from it. And then we give people, I think, around 2 minutes to think about those things. I'll usually take some notes, and then we go around the room and hear about everyone's highlights, lowlights, and noble failures. And then we open up a Fig Jam board and then post like everything that we want to celebrate from those 2 weeks. There's also a gratitude corner where you can add photos of people that you are feeling grateful for and why. And then as a team, we go through that whole Fig Jam board together and just kind of review everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks. The best part is as we're reviewing that, everyone's stamping their faces, adding stickers, putting confetti over everything. And it's just super fun. And then we do some customer quotes and stories, and then some founder thoughts, Q&A, and then close out the meeting with a closing round. And so it's an hour and a half, which I think whenever I have a meeting that's an hour and a half, I'm like, ugh, it's an hour and a half. That's a long time, but it always goes by super fast. It's always really fun and engaging, which I think is unusual for hour and a half meetings. So that's mine. Okay, Harper.
Oh boy. I think the meeting that I immediately thought of was our kind of weekly update meeting where the team all comes together. And the reason that I like it is that it has a very regular format. So everyone going into the meeting knows exactly what's going to happen in the meeting. Although there are opportunities for discussion, it's very formed, and so it starts with an intro, typically by one of the founders, just kind of updating on any big items for this week, and a lot of kind of prompting for celebration. For instance, this last week we got some new benefits, so kind of talking through that, and then the exciting part is a prompted demos. So going through the entire team, regardless of what their kind of their business unit is, so to speak, and just saying, is there anything you want to demo? And this allows for a lot of celebration for people who are doing their work. And that leads to a tactical where once again we go through prompts and just make sure that everyone has an opportunity to bring up anything. And you never know what people are going to talk about. They could talk about they're taking next week off. They could talk about some very small tactical problem they're having in code base or what it might be. And it allows for a little bit of discussion, but very, very quick and efficient. And then the final thing is something I picked up from Eugene, which is we then have a game. And so then we do something that's really fun and very specific to our company, where we have a GIF off where someone is kind of playing apples to apples, but with GIFs. And it's really, really fun and everyone loves it. And then the person who takes notes, because we always have a note taker, is the person that gets to pick the topic for the GIF off. And so it's this fun way of everyone is excited about taking notes again. And it's a nice little hack, but it's very, very structured. And so people come into it and they're stoked because they know it'll be fun, it'll have some humor, but at the same time, they're learning and engaged. And not always do we have a lot of agenda items and not always do we have a lot of demos, but there's always a couple and it's always exciting.
Thanks, Harper. Kate.
Yeah, I'm going to be unexpected and talk about a meeting that is not efficient, because I don't think efficiency is always a goal in meetings, particularly around meetings that exist to kind of foster a sense of team and belonging. So once a month, we have what we call Native Apps All Team. Like the other times of the month, people have their platform specific meetings, which tend to be like more focused and more kind of tactical. And so for our all team meeting, we always start with what we call feelings time. So like everybody has to share one or more feeling, which I truly enjoy. It's my favorite way to start a meeting. We often have somebody new on the team. And so like we will take time to introduce ourselves, to get to know them a bit and to make them feel welcome. We often do demos because people are working on disparate projects, and so it's really nice to see what other people on the same team are working on. And then typically we pick some kind of discussion topics. So it might be like, you know, the meetups, how do people feel about them, traveling, like what do we want to do for our team? We had a session about feedback once. One time we had a session about incident response. And so we try and kind of have some kind of facilitated or, you know, open discussion together where we kind of learn something and reach agreement in a way that it is better to do in a live context than in text. So anything that can be text-based, we have taken it out of the meeting and put it in text. And so, you know, that bit for me is always interesting. And I feel like I get a different sense of what people care about, what they want than in their kind of text-based updates.
Thanks, Kate. Juan Pablo.
I'm torn between two meetings. So maybe I'm gonna rush through both. A favorite meeting that I ran, because right now I'm in no meetings other than this. This is my favorite meeting right now. But at Splice, my staff meeting was the favorite meeting I ran because it was very effective, very efficient, and it was really fun, even though it was very difficult. My staff meeting, we had directors and engineering managers, and also a few senior ICs. And it was effectively the space where people with some very difficult decisions came to get feedback, input, and to like drive forward, where we would talk about performance, or where we rolled out when we rolled out engineering levels, and it was difficult, right, to level people and to talk about compensation or how to grow. It was kind of the way that I delegated a lot of the authority I had as a VP of engineering onto people who should be making those decisions, and built a lot of camaraderie, and I think it made us a really effective leadership group. It always had an agenda. It always had a purpose. If we didn't have anything to talk, we just wouldn't even meet. And there was also always a note taker. I think I'm gonna for the next time around, I'm gonna copy the game idea. I'm gonna get some pointers from y'all. The other one that there was an IC led meeting, software architecture review, is my favorite because it was the first constructive sort of architecture review I've ever seen or I've ever witnessed, where people would actually want to go and present like, hey, here's the architecture we're gonna like the direction that we're gonna take. And people it was like an educational session more than like tearing apart. It was run by Sue Lockwood, and she did a great job. So that's my other one.
Thanks, Juan Pablo. And Katie.
So my favorite meeting, it's actually also my staff meeting that I have once a week with the engineering managers. And the reason it's my favorite meeting is it's the meeting that I very consistently feel could not possibly have been an email. And it's also, like what Kate said, it's not necessarily aimed at being super efficient. It often is if that's what's needed, but it's a team building support space for us to feel like, well, we're all in this together as the engineering managers at this company. How it works, it's a 45-minute meeting. It starts at 1/4 the hour because managers always have lots happening. So it gives people a little bit of a break, and I like that. And it has an agenda, and anybody can add a topic to the agenda that they feel needs problem solving for the group. And those topics often come out of their one-to-ones with me, where I'll say, well, this is actually relevant to a couple of your peers. Can we put this on the EM huddle agenda and talk about it as a group? So that's helpful because it means I'm not solving, coaching through the same thing with a bunch of different managers. We can talk about it all together. And if we don't have topics on the agenda, we used to cancel the meeting, but we no longer do this. We keep the meeting. And then what we do is a kind of training session where I will, quickly rush to lead dev or somewhere else, and I'll find some article, one of the other panelists here have written, or something interesting, because ongoing training as a leader is something that we expect our team to do, but really everyone's very busy and everyone's exhausted. And when do we do this? So I'll, come up with, okay, here's the thing that I found helpful for me. And, these are the key highlights of the article. What do we all think? And then lastly, another thing we do is something I call real life manager, where one person is sort of encouraged into sharing with the group a real life management situation that they are facing. And then we group brainstorm it and figure it out together. And they're usually the really thorny questions that there's not necessarily one right way, or like all of your trade-offs here are kind of bad. And that's really helpful and really fun for everybody to go through. So we do real life manager. I don't know why I call it that. It's just sort of stuck. And I don't play games. I think we should add games. I think the GIF-off will be really popular at Buffer. So
that sounds like a reality TV show or something that I would definitely watch.
It's like all the drama. Real life.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I think there were some themes of like having a clear purpose, and then all the meetings I feel like were really structured. And even if they weren't like, let's get through it as quickly as possible to be efficient, they were structured to make space for connection or, whatever best served the purpose of the meeting. So now we're going to move into what a few of you alluded to, which is kind of this dynamic agenda. And this is an opportunity for anyone to add topics that they want to discuss for the meeting. And, if we were all in the same workspace, this meeting tool would allow for all of us to edit or take notes or add topics, which makes it really easy to collaboratively build an agenda. Since you all are meeting guests, if there's anything you'd like to add to the agenda at any point, whether that's like a tip you really want to share, something that's related, but maybe not super relevant to the current agenda topic, feel free to speak up and then we'll add it to the agenda for you. So just to kick us off for today's agenda, I've preloaded it with some of the common challenges that people have emailed in or shared on Twitter, saying that, you know, this is the challenge that they're facing with their meetings. And for all of you watching, we're going to start working our way through these agenda items. If you have challenges that you're facing that you'd like us to discuss, add them to the Zoom chat, and then we'll get through as many as we can in the meeting and try to add like a bit of, you know, descriptiveness to your questions so that we can really get a sense of what you're facing. All right, so here we are. Here's the agenda for today. We'll just dive in, and then panelists, if there's anything you want to add, shout them out at any time. So people aren't engaged. So this is one that was emailed to me. It says, to be honest, the major problem that I'm facing while attending remote and hybrid meetings is the fact that almost always a few, usually remote participants, limit their contribution to their bare minimum, i.e. they remain silent for most of the time and they only respond if they are explicitly asked to. So does anyone have any thoughts or ideas on how to tackle this? And Sean will help us take notes as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
My question is, well, we're seeing here that the remote participants limit their contribution. Does the person writing this know for a fact that they are choosing to limit their contribution, or is there some other barrier?
I don't have any follow-up information.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I would ask that question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to Katie's points, there's kind of two angles on this, right? There's like the meeting facilitator themselves, and like, honestly, people run meetings badly and nobody gives them feedback. So if I'm in a meeting that's poorly run, then I just give the person some feedback and like make some suggestions on how they can improve it, and then like actively support those improvements. And this has led to better meetings. And then the other thing is, you know, the people who aren't speaking up, and like as a manager, you have levers there too. So, you know, you can, are they introverted? Do they need more prep ahead of time? Like, for important topics, I often spend my one-on-ones with people, at least some time in it, prepping those people for what's going to come up in those meetings, helping them like formulate their thoughts better and encouraging them to express them when, you know, it shows up in the meeting. And ideally having a relationship where like, yeah, maybe I do have to call on them, but like when I do, like they feel really comfortable making their contribution.
Juan Pablo, using the raise hand function.
Thank you. Lauren, I like giving people a space that isn't verbal to contribute, right? So sometimes either you have a Slack chat running in the background where people are going back and forth, or even Zoom chat or another space where you can add things that aren't really interrupty or commentary. And even better, I like giving that space before the meeting happens. So having a document around the meeting that shares perhaps discussions or meeting points so you can comment on it ahead of time. Sometimes it makes it easier for people who either don't like interrupting, don't feel comfortable speaking in public, in where sometimes we interpret that as lack of engagement, but it's just like we're not all like super, oh, let's be in each other's face. So that creating other spaces for preferred methods of communication is a useful tool.
Katie.
Sorry, I would want to ask these remote folks, if it's the same people or if it's, you know, different people, what can I improve with a meeting that would allow you to participate? Because we just don't know here. Maybe your meeting's super boring. Maybe these people have been invited to a meeting that's completely irrelevant to them and they genuinely have nothing to share. Maybe it's a hybrid meeting and there's like a little conference speaker down there and they're like on a laptop in the corner and like they've just given up trying to, you know, get someone to notice. So there could be a lot of barriers here and we just don't know what they are. So I would want to go around and ask them, and not in a, hey, why are you disengaged with my meetings? But how can I improve my meetings that you know, are more able to engage? Because I've noticed that you are silent and I value you and I want to hear from you, and you're invited for a reason, assuming that you have invited them for a reason. So I found myself having an emotional reaction to this person by being like, I just want to take the facilitator aside and be like, I need to help you make your meeting better. Like, the major problem is probably not the attendee. And yeah, they might just be really introverted, like, you know, to what Kate and Juan Pablo said, you know, maybe they aren't going to think on their feet. Are you providing adequate time to prepare ahead of time? Or are you, you know, dropping a bombshell and then, cool, having them react live? And that's difficult, you know?
Yeah, I've seen people are like, oh, well, I think the introverted people should engage. So sometimes I just call on them and like ask them what they're thinking. And like, that could work, but more often than not, like, I think predictability in meetings is really important. And so like, even what we did earlier for the meetings updates, where it's like, hey, we're going to all answer this prompt. You have a minute to think about it. And then we're going to go and use the spinner and go around the room. Everyone's going to answer this question. And that could be like reaction to anything, right? Like, hey, share 2 thoughts you have about how this launch went, or like something like that, rather than just being like, hey, this person's not participating. Let me like call on them so that they have to speak, because that can then create some anxiety around going to those meetings.
I think it puts the pressure on the person, right? And actually part of good meeting facilitation, and this is why the check-in at the beginning is so helpful, is creating that environment where like everybody does feel that they can speak, and that work has to be done one-on-one, and it has to be done as part of the group as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm gonna make the decision to move on to the next topic. This person said, I've struggled with time boxing and moderating conversations when they turn unproductive or things get out of control. Sometimes there could be situations where leadership is involved and you're trying to keep things under control. This kind of came up earlier in some of our pet peeves. Harper, any thoughts?
This is impossible. I mean, I've been in this situation so many times. It's such a hard problem. And I do think that the tooling we have around remote meetings doesn't make it easier. And with that said, what we have found is making sure all of the meetings have some semblance of structure, so people can understand what to expect when going into it. And then also a culture of saying no crosstalk, and people understanding what that means, or a culture of saying, this seems like a different topic, should we add it to the agenda at the end? Or saying, okay, great, like let's split this off into another topic. Being able to like have these kind of stop words or wake words of sorts that kind of everyone knows this works to split what's happening now into another thing. The other thing that we've been working on in this, because startups are hard and sometimes things are complicated, is making it okay to say, I need some space or time to think through this. Why don't we reconvene in a little bit? That doesn't necessarily mean tomorrow. It could be like in 15 minutes. It could be like, let's all go get a drink of water and walk back to the desk. But just giving this opportunity for people to say, okay, let's slow this down. Let's pause this a bit because I'm unable to follow, or I have all these ideas. And one of my founders that I work with a lot, Dylan, is very different than myself. And so we've had to learn this stuff with one-on-one of, he's like, I need time to think through what you're saying. You're speaking too fast. And I'm just, spitting stuff out. And so it'll be like, okay, pause. And it's like, well, that also works with the team too. Like we have the same problem with many of the people. So just taking time has been helpful.
Juan Pablo?
It's just such a challenging topic. So it also depends on your power, right? Or the power differential in the meeting. Right? I find like if I am a leader in another meeting, whether a leader is interrupting or doing something that sort of like derailing the meeting, it falls on me to follow it on track, to help it get it back on track. Sorry, I think in Spanish. And if not, to give feedback afterwards to my peers, or the people. I will also expect, like, if I'm in a meeting with Harper or Kate, I've actually been in meetings with Kate, and we've given each other feedback about, like, hey, this could be run better, or this could be, and I would expect that. So it's also, what sort of standards do you have around leadership? The problem isn't necessarily the meeting. The problem is probably your leaders, or the relationship there, and finding ways to manage that is what would be important. If you don't have a place where you can actually give that feedback, finding the channels for that feedback to get back to the person, because either they're oblivious or they're doing it on purpose. And if they're doing it on purpose, then it's a completely separate problem that you probably need to get a lot of folks involved.
I'll add that I think having some facilitation, maybe not even official training, but just like even having like a set of 5 phrases that you keep in your back pocket that you just use over and over again, like that sounds like a separate topic. Should we add that to the agenda? Or like, we have 20 minutes left and we said we wanted to get to this outcome. Do we want to talk about this topic or take it offline? Just like having a bunch of these really easy to go to phrases. Well, first, it makes it easier for the facilitator to pull out those phrases when there's a power dynamic. And it feels less personal if you've been using those phrases, over and over again, and you kind of check in. Maybe you phrase it a little bit differently, because sometimes there may be cases where you do want to, totally change the direction of the meeting because it's more in service of the purpose. But I found that I have facilitated meetings with executives when I was nowhere in the executive team. And it's you can kind of use like humor and make it fun. Like, oh, the facilitator is just really gonna, like, I won't curse on here, but really be quite strict, and people kind of look forward to experiencing that. But I think it is depending on the dynamic, like I'm not a very intimidating person. So people really enjoyed when I lay down the law in a meeting, but that may be different if it's a different person. So, but it is possible, but I found that most other people did not do that. Kate.
Yeah, so one thing that I find really useful when people are talking past each other is to just listen and then find a way to reconcile what they're saying and bring it back to the level at which you want the meaning to operate. So one thing that I see repeatedly is we're in a meeting, supposedly it's about strategy, and then there is some kind of off the rails debate about a bunch of details. And so then I'll try and be like, it sounds like there's this theme of details that falls under this thing, and name it reliability or, whatever. And then be like, maybe we should focus on and bring the topic up to the higher level, which often I find if people don't have bad intent, they may just want to feel heard. So this is a way to make them feel heard, pull them forcibly out of the rabbit hole, and get the meeting back on track.
Mm-hmm. I find people like to be pulled out of the rabbit hole too. They're like, oh, thanks for interrupting me. Harper.
I just wanted to echo something that I think we're all talking about, which is that we expect the meeting to be facilitated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really big one, is that for us to enter a meeting, for my team to enter a meeting, I think there is an expectation that there is a facilitator, and then hopefully that facilitator isn't the one that's causing problems, which isn't always true. I'm sometimes causing problems as much as everyone else, but the idea is that the facilitator is the facilitator. Everyone acknowledges that. So if they are trying, like Kate just mentioned, to let them talk or find the bridge or whatever that might be, everyone respects them as the facilitator. And I think that's such an important thing, because it's this a little bit of a sacred role in some of these meetings that we all look at, and we look to that person to control the flow in some ways.
Thanks. All right, let's move on to this third one, ad hoc meetings. All right, one of the biggest issues I see is that meetings are scheduled ad hoc without much context. For example, background information, links to docs, and/or a clear description of what questions we're trying to answer. This often results in having to answer basic questions that could have been addressed offline prior to the meeting, or conversations wandering off in an irrelevant direction.
I'm RSVPing no to this meeting.
Yeah, I was thinking, this sounds like a boring meeting that Kate would not go to.
I think I'm going to just go into expect structure, create an expectation of structure so that you have to have a set of things to even start the meeting. I do know that there are need for ad hoc conversations to happen, whether you're like, product development or what have you. But typically, like if I get an invite on my calendar, I would channel Kate and just say no if it did not have some very specific expectation of structure, or the worst thing ever is like brainstorm about X, and you're like, what is X and why are we brainstorming? So I do think we have to create space for that, but my expectation would be do it in such a way that allows for some structure so that people know what to expect. People work differently, and the structure that we give them allows them to have expectations and work their own way.
Mm-hmm. Juan Pablo?
So I also channel my inner Kate, but I've learned a few tricks to do that in a way that it sort of reduces the frequency of this happening. I think a common thread is that we tend to assign the problems to meetings to like actual meetings and not people or how people work. And I've learned in some cases, folks aren't as organized or they're very busy, right? So sometimes it's easier for me to do work, to think about this problem at that meeting. So I'm going to create a meeting for a group of people, and I'm just only going to do work there because either I'm too busy, I have 30 hours of meeting. Like these folks who are having 30 hours of meetings, they don't have time to do work. And so they create other meetings to do that work with other people. So my trick is to the invite, respond with a document with a series of questions of what I've gathered. And I say, hey, does this address, or do you want to take it beyond that? And basically take 5 to 10 minutes to channel that, to turn that meeting into an email or into a document that we can then discuss and decide, hey, we actually do need to do this, or we do need to decide, or we do need to talk. But kind of like throw friction at the meeting, not to, because I was usually very quick to just like, no, don't waste my time. So that's kind of my middle ground now.
Yeah. Katie.
Yeah, I would say that I have a lot of trouble channeling my inner Kate for 2 reasons. The first thing is it's the power dynamics. If somebody with less power than me tries to do this, I'll be like, no, I'm busy. But if my CEO does this, like, I'll be there. The second thing is I'm quite a curious person. So if someone's like, oh, let's have a meeting, like there's a huge part of me that like really wants to know what will happen, which can be a problem. So what I do to try to like get structure is ask for the things that are making this not great. So I'll say like, okay, great. Like, where's the meeting agenda? As in assuming it exists. And the person's like, oh, we don't have one. And I'll be like, cool. Like, what should I have read for this meeting? And they're like, no, there's nothing. And then I'll say, oh, how about we do this tomorrow? And then you can send an agenda and send me something to read. And then we don't waste each other's time. And that's worked a bit better. But again, this works much easier without a huge power differential. If this is somebody that has a lot more organizational power than you, like I would probably caution you against just like not rocking up. But what I think does work well is block out your things in your calendar so that you have your own boundaries, and you can do this wherever you are in an organization. So put in lunch break, put in gym, put in deep work focus time, so that when people are trying to like schedule this meeting, they can see that you're actually busy, doing your job. And then there's also this Slack integration called Clockwise that will link to your calendar, and it will say, Katie is in deep work focus time, and then you're able to kind of set those boundaries, and people then learn, okay, trying to pull you into an ad hoc thing, it's not necessarily going to work super well. That's it.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
Anything else here? We can move on.
I guess one thing is, I do occasionally have to go to such meetings because I didn't manage to say no, but if somebody has kind of abdicated their responsibility as facilitator, you can just take it. Like, if they don't know how to run a meeting, they're not going to complain when you just start running a meeting. So if somebody invites me to a meeting and they're not running it well, there's a good chance that I will just seize the meeting, set the purpose of the meeting, figure out an agenda, take everyone through it, and ideally be done, within 30 minutes tops. And actually, I was on a bit of a power spree the other week, and I seized 2 meetings, and just ran them with like, one of them with like a totally different like coaching bent, but the other one with aggressive efficiency. And like, I've realized this is just actually like, firstly, I found it very fun, although I'm probably not going to do this every week. But secondly, that it was just like actually like a powerful tool for like shaping those conversations in the way that I wanted them to be.
I think a lot of times people think, oh, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but every time I've done that, like everyone's just like, thank God you did that. Like everyone's super grateful, including the person who was, you know, supposedly supposed to run it. So I think we could all channel our inner Kate more. All right. Next agenda item, something I was extremely curious about, so I added it here rather than interrupting the other topic. But Harper, I would love if you could explain how this GIF off works so that we can all have them on our meetings.
Okay, well, it's actually really fun. It's specific to us because we build a virtual camera that allows for GIFs to show up. Here's a GIF that I used recently in a meeting. Let's see if it actually shows up. But it's like this kind of, oh, there it was. But it's this idea of just like being able to kind of show something in reaction. A lot of what we've been building is software that allows for people at work and remote work cultures to react and participate without using audio. Which I think is limiting, just adding sub channels. And so how it works, and I think this work with many different tools, is there's just a topic. And so the topic was recently pythons. And so then it was about trying to find, or actually it was cobras. So then it was like trying to find the best GIF around cobras. This was my entry. Which wasn't very good and failed drastically. And so the thing that's fun about this is it is like any apples to apples type game. It doesn't matter. It's not just trying to find the funniest, it's trying to find the best for that person. So every person that is the moderator or the facilitator or the note taker, whoever is choosing the topic, gets to, they could just have something that really tickles them from a memory, or it could be something really funny. And so you just never know. Do you pick the funny one? Do you pick the earnest one? Do you try and appeal to that person? And it's so delightful. And in many of the ways that you are running this meeting with that prompt where you have 30 seconds to think through, that's exactly how we run it. And it really can be anything. And I think there's this opportunity to have something fun to do. And this allows us to just something to look forward to, especially if like, you know, that no matter what's going to happen, there's going to be this ridiculous GIF off in a second that everyone's going to laugh about. And it's the most ridiculous thing ever. And then you also learn about new GIFs. And if you work with people who are, you know, from different backgrounds or different ages, then you start to have this kind of cultural meme share happen, which is also really interesting and unexpected, where you start to actually learn, oh, you have no idea who G.I. Joe was or whatever. And this kind of thing where it's like, how does this work? And so it's been really delightful.
That also sounds, because I think people often are like, oh, you know, in person is better, but this is something that you wouldn't really be able to do in person. So that's pretty cool.
We're scared of that actually, because we've developed, this is a startup that has started during this time period, and a lot of the tools that we have used, I don't think would translate as well to in person. And yet we really like some of these tools. And so there's this idea of hybrid that we're really scared of. And there's this super idea of in person that we're all totally freaked out about. And so a little bit of this is like, we love this world of being able to have all these sub-channels. And one aspect of this is that you don't have to have your mic on. You can do this all by listening, reading, and then just reacting. And so it's pretty ridiculous, but it's fun.
Cool. Thanks for satisfying my curiosity. One more topic I added. Kate, you had said, you know, if a meeting's not going well, I'm just going to give feedback to the facilitator. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about like, and other people as well, like how have you found effective ways, or what have you found to be effective in like giving feedback to a facilitator that maybe is not doing a great job facilitating, either in the moment or afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So one like concrete example is my product partner was running a meeting, and I felt that it could be more efficient, basically. And so I just gave her that feedback and was like, you know, some suggestions, like, can we get status updates out of the meetings? And also like making it like, I personally cannot listen to status updates and like have any recollection of what happened. So it's actually much more helpful to me if they're in writing. And so that's a way to kind of make it about like my inadequacy rather than like, you know, how she was running the meeting. And then also, you know, like kind of hearing what people are finding and what they've tried first and what they're thinking about, and then validating that, right? So we ended up, you know, like just kind of working together to make these things better. So I might notice things and just tell her that she has noticed or hasn't decided to do anything about yet. So we were having a number of ad hoc meetings, which were basically kickoffs, what we call kickoffs, postmortems, like project check-ins or whatever. And they were always in the same block of time. And she and I were always in all of them. And it was just, I was getting all these calendar, like fine times, this and that. And then people were overbooking them. And then we were like having to like reschedule random meetings around like our availability. And I was like, this is bonkers, you know, like we know what time these meetings are, like let's just put it in the calendar and people just take them and we can like get rid of this like scheduling shenanigans. And then we like work together to do that, and it's been a huge improvement.
I'm hearing is just kind of approaching it as a collaborative process, rather than like, hey, I'm giving you feedback because you're doing a bad job.
Yeah, and being a partner in it, right? Like we're in these meetings together. She doesn't want to waste her time.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste my time. Like I don't want to waste her time either.
Like, look, this meeting has been quite boring and on the cusp of I'm gonna delete it. So
yeah, I mean, there was a meeting that I was just refusing to go to, and she like eventually was like, Kate, I want you to do more here. And I was like, but this meeting is too boring, so you need to fix it before I will attend this meeting.
Well, any other tips for feedback to facilitator?
Yeah, I think the other thing that I have found work is ask, if it's a regular meeting, ask the attendees either in the meeting at the end of a meeting one day or, you know, one-on-one or what have you, are there any recommendations to make this go smoother? There's a chance that other people are having the same feeling, but maybe it's power dynamics, maybe they just don't feel like it's appropriate. And it might just be weird to give feedback about how a meeting is ran. I've been in a lot of meetings and I've very rarely heard feedback inside of the meeting about how it's ran. But give people an opportunity to actually give feedback. I wish this meeting would do this or that, or I wish we would cover these things, or it could be shorter. I remember we used to run all hands at my last company, and they would just go on forever until finally we changed it drastically, thanks to Jean, who's changed the lives of many of my employees, and changed it drastically. And the feedback we received afterwards was incredible. People were like, this is so much better. It saved so much time. I really like this. And it was like, why didn't you say something before? And they were just like, what am I going to do? Like, you know, it's awkward. And so I do think making it a team thing, how can we make this better? It doesn't have to just be for the facilitator, especially if you rotate facilitators, because it might be a way that the company runs meeting, not just that specific facilitator.
That's also something you can add a prompt in like a closing round of like, you know, what could be better about this meeting? And then if everyone's saying something and it feels like, hey, we're kind of working on this meeting together rather than criticizing Harper's meeting, then it just feels a lot more collaborative, as Kate was saying.
There's a difference here between implicit feedback and explicit feedback, right? So explicit feedback about a meeting, people might say, I was bored, there were too many status updates, right? But then there's implicit feedback, right? Which is like, well, this is a strategy about an objective and people aren't clear on our strategy. And so actually, if you can surface that, then you can make the implicit explicit and say, we should spend more time on strategy in this meeting because what I'm noticing is that people aren't clear about it.
I saw something on Twitter where someone was like, whenever I sense that there's alignment, they pop like a thing on FigJam where it's like a statement and then you stamp your face on like how much you agree with that statement. And that can be a good way to just like suss out like, are we aligned on this? Like, is there that like implicit like misalignment there that then you could try to address, whereas someone's probably not going to bring it up like proactively. Cool. We've got 5 minutes left. I think this one was about how to interrupt people, but I think it's been addressed in the chat. So I'm going to delete that. And so let's move to our closing round. So the closing round mirrors the opening round. It's just a chance for people to get in some final thoughts, and also like share, in a meeting, you could share like, how was the meeting? How do you feel after the meeting? If people are like, oh, I'm still really confused, or, oh, I feel really clear about what I'm going to do for the next week, that's like really good data to have. So we're going to have the prompts. What's one final insight or piece of advice you'd like to share about how to run better meetings? And what's one thing you're looking forward to this week or for the upcoming weekend? I will spin it. Harper.
The one thing that we have done differently for this company that we haven't done in the past, I think this is because of COVID and lockdown and all of us being remote and not having an office, is before all of our stands, we have a regularly scheduled good morning meeting where people, it's relatively optional, but people just can come in and hang out. And it is completely off the rails on purpose. There is no work talk. It's just like, what did you do last night? Like barely any prompts, but a lot of times people just join and kind of listen and warm up to being at work. Because although we work relatively regular hours, some people start later, some people start earlier. What we found is there wasn't a lot of the camaraderie. There wasn't a lot of the kind of water cooler, and so we just made one in the morning, just called Good Morning, and it's hilarious. It's a favorite meeting to start with because it just gets you warmed up and excited about the team. It has nothing to do with the work. It's just like, let's hang out because we enjoy working together. And it's very I'm trying to think what was happening this morning. This morning, yeah, it was off the rails. It was I'm not even going to talk about it.
Anything you're looking forward to?
Oh boy. I don't know. I mean, I'm excited to take some of the notes. I took some great notes. I love the feeling time that Kate talked about. Like, I feel like that's something that we are missing. We have a lot of opportunities to share information about one another, but feeling time. So I'm looking forward to kind of taking this back. As always, I learn a lot from these panels and watching the chat. Also, there were some really good ideas going back and forth. So I'm excited to try that out. Yeah, I'm looking forward to, I'm just excited right now.
Thanks, Harper. Juan Pablo.
Cool. I'd say that meetings tend to have a really, really negative rap, especially in sort of distributed environments, because they end up being the symptom of a lot of dysfunction, right? It's where like the meetings where all of this shows up because it's where you have the most interactions. And so my insight, or what I'd like to share, is try to go behind the motivation of what is causing that dysfunction in the meeting. And it's not the meeting per se, right? Especially with engineering groups where we've created culture like, oh, meetings are super terrible and I don't invite me to meetings, and I'm agile and I don't think about anything, give me coffee and like all these cultural like things that are fairly negative that hinder our ability to work as a group. Managers just have to dig through that in one-on-ones or in spaces where we're trying to find out why do you not really want to spend time? Why do you not, and try to solve the root cause as close as you can to a root cause as possible. So that would be my piece of advice. And weekend, excited about farmers market. I'm excited about making some empanadas as well. I've been perfecting one of my recipes to share with a few friends, and editing some photos from my trip to Iceland. Those would be 3 things that I'm excited about.
Thank you. Katie.
So I am going to share the words that I found help me interrupt. There's 2 phrases. The one is, I'm just going to stop you right there. I got that from someone else. And the other one is just to blue hat real quick. And then there's the system of hats that like, you know, they have different things. You can look up, you know, blue hat or the blue hat system and share that with your team, because then you're just assuming a role. The blue hat is the hat of the facilitator. And I like that it's the sort of lingo, because if you say just to facilitate real quick and you're not the facilitator, that's like way more of a thing when you're interrupting. But just a blue hat, you know, real quick. So that's the other phrase I use. If anyone else has phrases, put them in the chat. I like to collect phrases because then I feel like I can handle the situation. I've got the words. The things I'm looking forward to, I have some sour cherries in the fridge that I'm going to make into a like tart or pie. So I'm pretty excited about that. However, they have pits. So I have about a pound of sour cherries to get de-pitted. So I'm less excited about that.
Thanks, Katie. Kate.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to share is like, it's not your job to go to meetings. Meetings are a piece of how you accomplish your job, whatever that is. So whether it's like making sure that decisions get made, or like building rapport, or building teams, or developing people, like meetings are like a useful tool for all of these things. But like the meeting in and of itself is unimportant and replaceable as long as the goal gets accomplished. And so yeah, just if you're in too many meetings, just like, you know, take a deep breath and think about whether these meetings are actually accomplishing the goals that are important and are your job, because the meetings are not. And what I'm looking forward to, this weekend, we are going ziplining and we are going quad biking. So that is going to be super fun.
Thanks, Kate. I guess my piece of advice would just be like, you know, whether you use a meeting tool or whatever you use, like, I think predictability is really important, because like going into a day of meetings where you're just like, I have no idea what's going to happen in this half hour or an hour is very anxiety inducing. And when I know what's going to happen, I just feel like way more at ease. So maybe that's a Google Doc with a few like bullet points, but whatever it is, try to make your meetings more predictable. And then one thing I'm looking forward to is we got a new grill last weekend and we've been grilling a lot on it. So having some people over and having a barbecue. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the panelists for joining me for this panel/meeting. And these notes will be sent out to everyone as well. Thanks, Sean, for taking notes for us.
Excellent note taking.